Welcome to Talk South Asian to Me. My name is Michelle.
And my name is Anusha. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central and hear us react to each other's stories about mental health and growing up in different South Asian households.
And remember, this podcast is not therapy. Engage with what feels entertaining and resonates with you, and leave what doesn't.
Yeah. So let's get into our topic today. Today's topic
Woo!
is dating. D for
Ooh, okay,
dating.
wait. Before we start continuing, I wanted to
Uh-huh.
just share that I have my special, amazing dog with me, Bella. And if you hear some barking or see her or hear any
Mm,
footsteps, that's her. And I'll try to minimize the noise, but just wanted to put that disclaimer out there.
Love it. Well, we can hear Bella's perspective too on dating.
Exactly. I'm excited about this topic, dating.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this topic. I know you've been really looking forward to this one.
Hmm.
And I'm
Yes.
so ready for your stories. Okay, so I was trying to kind of keep up with our typical tradition so far of finding some kind of stats and some kind of background on dating. So I did a little bit of digging and I found
Okay.
an LA Times article written by Anumita Kaur in
Okay.
2022 of May. And
Okay, it's
basically
pretty
in the
relevant.
yeah, and it's pretty recent and she talks a lot about South Asian dating apps basically. So,
Ooh,
interesting topic.
dating
Dating, gotta
apps.
talk about dating apps in this modern world of dating.
Exactly.
The original, this is more of a personal anecdote, but the original, dating app was shadi.com. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yes. The biodata.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
wow.
bio data, exactly. I'm pretty sure it still exists, though. I'm sure
Yes.
someone's still
Yeah.
using it.
And now we have Indian matchmaking. We have all these different
Oh my gosh,
different
yes.
ways of finding someone too.
Yeah, exactly. Although I have lots of thoughts on that, which you will hear about later.
Hmm.
So, in the article, in the LA Times article, she talks about a couple of really big ones. One, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of the different ones that I've actually done my research on and what those are. Let me
Okay.
know how many of them you've actually heard. I'm sure you've heard of at
Okay.
least one. First one, of
Okay. I'm
course,
ready.
Dill Mill, 2014.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I have heard of that.
Yeah, that one came out when we were all in college, so
Mm,
that one we're kind of familiar with. I don't know about you, but I
yeah.
knew a couple of close friends who found their significant others on Dill Mill.
Oh,
Yeah,
success. That's good.
I know. Um, the other one it talks about is a bit more recent one called Mirchi. It came out in 2020.
Mm. Oh, I have not heard of that one.
Yeah,
It sounds familiar, but I feel like I haven't really heard of that. Okay.
yeah. And I don't know, I haven't heard of that one either, but I kind of chalk that up to I'm not dating. I was not dating in
Hmm.
2020, so that makes sense why I
Exactly.
haven't
Me
heard of
too.
it.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this one though? I had not heard of this one before. It's called Minder or Minder, I guess, like Tinder with an M. It's a
Yeah. Is it
Muslim
like
dating app.
Muslim Tinder? I have
Yeah,
heard of that.
exactly.
I have heard of that. Yes.
Yeah. So that one I
It's
hadn't heard
still
of
up
before,
and
but that's what
going.
I thought.
I've heard about it
Okay,
recently, actually. I learned
there
about
you
it
go.
recently. So I guess it's still going,
I
still
love
in
that.
business.
That's so cool. It's like Tinder is not enough. We need our own version. We're gonna put a South Asian
Yes,
spin on it. I love it.
exactly.
So basically, when I was reading this article, I read one quote that really stood out to me. The Mill founder, KJ, I'm gonna butcher his name, Dalival, I think is how you pronounce his
Okay.
name. Him and his research team, when they were coming up with Dill Mill, found that in their research, over 80% of South Asians date and marry within the South Asian community. Hence,
Mm,
Dill Mill and these kind of dating apps being born out of this research of we might date possibly other people apparently, but we come back to our own community apparently. And in the article, it goes on to kind of say that they found that people tend to seek out partners that are of similar upbringings or of at least similar cultural backgrounds because it gives them that sort of deep rooted need for identity and preservation of culture.
mm, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
So,
easier, right? Like less of a challenge.
Less
when you have family.
explanation.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. What do you think about that though? Like, do you feel like that resonates with you? Like, was that something you've ever considered when you were kind of out there dating? Like culture, like race, religion, like how important were those things to you?
I think like later in life, definitely. But like when I first started dating, I feel like my mind was a little bit like love is love. And I still believe that, like love is love.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I think it was important to find someone that shares a similar background to me. And that was
Mm.
just like my personal preference, my personal belief. And it does resonate a little bit with what you mentioned in the research, right? Like similar
Yeah.
cultures, like preservation. I take pride in my culture. So I feel like I wanted a partner that also took pride in the same culture. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
a big, big supporter of like, if you find someone outside of your
Yeah.
culture, outside of religion, like, I'm I love that. That's some like
Yeah.
that should not be a barrier to anyone to
Right.
be with their love
Yeah.
of their life.
Yeah.
Which is
Well
something
put.
I'm sure we're going to talk about moving forward, right? In today's episode. But
Oh yeah.
I do feel like in the beginning, I was definitely more open and like just exploring. But as I was becoming more serious about settling down, I was like, okay, I would like someone to be sharing the same background as me. What about you?
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, like I've definitely had crushes, didn't matter
Yeah.
race, religion,
Yeah,
none of that
exactly.
mattered. I had crushes, but I think I've kind of always known that for me and given like how family oriented I am,
Mhm.
I think I've kind of always known that the ideal was somebody who would like really just blend in with the family, someone who would really just already get some of the traditions.
Yeah.
And this didn't end up happening, but someone who would like speak the language and can share in like my love of like Telugu movies and like songs and
Mhm.
things like that. Didn't end up happening. That's okay. He still enjoys watching it with me, so that's a bonus.
Yeah,
But again, right, it kind of just goes to show that like at the end of the day, it's just about like if something is important to you, is your partner
mhm.
willing to share in that? I think that's really at the end of the
Exactly.
day what matters. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, well the last couple of tidbits I'll tell you was apparently a lot of us do use dating apps because
Mhm.
Mirchi came out and said that it has about 70,000 active users monthly. And that's just
Wow.
one site.
That is just one site. So
Yeah.
interesting in this day and age, like online dating has become so, so common. I feel like in
Hmm.
all society.
Yeah. Exactly. This kind of like speed dating.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I get a lot of clients who have like a very hate-love relationship with it, seemingly more hate than love.
Mm.
Yeah, just kind of the hate around like it's a little bit difficult, a little superficial, a little
Yeah.
hard to match with somebody nearby, hard to match with people that really actually click, for us to click in our intentions, like why we're on this app. I think it's just become a rough dating field out there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I've heard too. Just in general with online dating, like my friends that
Yeah.
share different races, ethnicities too, like it's just interesting to hear their point of view and their perspective about how online dating, it's like almost can cause a fatigue, right? Like you're
Oh, yeah.
repeating conversations, like you're doing
Mm.
first dates over and over again.
Yeah.
And I feel like it almost like you said, like your client said, it's superficial. It might be, it might even, this is just a theory and I'm just like, I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I wonder if this kind of shapes their standards and their views
Mm.
towards online dating and their partner that they want to find.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm sure it would have some kind of influence over that. But yeah, you put
Exactly.
it exactly the way that I have like seen it portrayed too. This idea of like it's such a fatigue at certain point. You do something over and over again, and it's not to say that you didn't do that, but like when it happens organically, it's a little bit different
Yeah.
versus at the touch of your finger, you have so many options that you just like swipe on, and then you have so many more opportunities, which can be a good thing. but a bad thing also if you build up the sense of fatigue of I have to start all over again and again and again. It's tiring.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And then some other things I've heard from a website called Kajal Mag is that Vilmil and Mirchi and like these kinds of Indian dating apps. The author of this article felt like it was very much geared towards like finding your partner, long-term partner for marriage, not for just like fun dating, if that's what they wanted.
Yes.
And she lists a couple others, like Thus. Have you heard of that one?
No, I have not.
Me neither. I've never heard of that one. And then there's one other called Kamma. Never heard of that either.
No, I've never heard of that one either.
Basically, there's a lot out there, clearly, which is good. Not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's kind of what I found researching like dating and like what that's like in, modern day
Yeah,
world of South Asians.
exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it makes sense. Online dating is a big, big part of the
Mhm.
dating world right now. And so,
Yeah.
like just like the
Yeah.
rest of society, South Asians, I'm sure, is affected by it as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, technology, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, shall we talk a little bit about my experience? I'm dying to tell you.
Yes, I'm excited to hear.
I think that you know a couple of these things, but I think you might be surprised hearing some of it too, though.
Okay. Okay. I'm
So here we
ready.
go. Here we go. As I have said in the past, even on this podcast, growing up, I had a lot of exposure to like very epic love stories, Bollywood, Tollywood, all the fun stuff.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't have to tell you, right? Like, there's a very specific kind of formula typically that used to happen back in the day, right? A lot of those films were like the girl didn't really date and like she was just kind of
Yeah.
like doing her own thing, chilling, and like this random dude would come pursue her and like she'd maybe be uninterested and she would be pursued. And then she's like, all right, fine. I suddenly do like you now.
Yes, that is the formula. You're just spot on that.
Right?
Every single movie, Bollywood movie I've watched, but somehow I still love all of
Yeah.
them.
I know. I love the classics. I mean, I sit here and
Yes,
make fun,
me
and
too.
like now I realize how silly and
Yes,
possibly damaging they are, but they're fun.
yes,
If
yes,
you can separate that, they're fun.
exactly.
So, that's the thing though, right? Like I've seen a lot of those kinds of films, very epic, very like you have to be pursued. Dating is kind of like forbidden and like but you wait until you find that one person that's like really worth it and then you literally like die trying to make it work with that person and fight for that love. Um but like in like my experience, at least in like my family and my circles of family relationships, a lot of like love, like dating, relationships, we didn't really talk about any of that. I don't know about you, but we literally zero. What is dating? Don't know. What is a love marriage? That's like, oh my God, gasp.
Hmm.
Like, what is that, right?
Yeah.
Everything is arranged. That's kind of how I grew up, is just not really talking about dating, not really talking about like boyfriend. What does that mean? Girlfriend? Like, what does that
Hmm.
mean? But what surprised me, though, even though that's how I grew up, what surprised me was that in middle school or high school, I can't quite remember when, I overheard a conversation where I think it was my dad, maybe it was my mom.
Okay.
But I think it was my dad who was saying, who was talking to somebody, I think one of my uncles, and he was saying, like, we don't need to find anybody for her. Like, in college, she'll find somebody. I don't know what context this
Oh,
was, but I heard this very random tidbit, and I was like, oh, okay. So, like, I
that's
can do that?
progressive.
I know.
Yeah.
Having gone from like, we don't talk about this, I don't know if that's what their
Hmm.
expectation is, to suddenly hearing a very like random conversation. It's weird, but it caught me off guard and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, cool, cool, cool. And that kind of tracked, because growing up like in high school and, at that age, like mom was always like reiterating this idea of like, yeah, we don't really date. Like, this is the time to like study. When you're in college, you can find a nice boy. It was very
There
much
you
like a
go.
let's push it off.
Yes.
Um, which I mean, okay, yeah, fair enough, I guess. But even like in college, right, when I did meet my now husband and like when I was in college, the idea was still like, oh, wait, you're studying in college? I know I said you can find somebody, but like, don't date.
Yeah.
Don't. And even like when they
Interesting.
knew about like Adi, like they were like uncomfortable with the word dating. Like, what does that mean, dating? What does it mean
Mm,
you're going on dates? What is it? Why do you have to say boyfriend? Just say friend.
yeah. Yeah.
They were so uncomfortable with that. And that's something that my husband still makes fun of my parents to this day. He's still like being like, can you say boyfriend now? They literally were
Yeah.
just so
That's so
uncomfortable with
funny. I can
that
imagine
though.
your parents going, boyfriend.
And I just like squirming and being like, okay, I don't have a problem. Boy, friend. Still a separation.
Yes.
They're so funny. But yeah, like even when I told them about him, it was a lot of the same kind of like don't like date, like what does that even mean? Don't say boyfriend, like just be casual, be like chill about it. Don't travel, don't, like physical affection, like obviously none of that. Maybe a hug, possibly, but like, come on, let's be chill.
Hmm.
Don't spend time alone together. Like all of these things, they were just, some of them were said out loud, verbalized, and some of them
Mm.
were kind of nonverbal, like things that you just kind of pick up on, you know?
Mm.
Um,
What were some of those things, nonverbal things?
Such as no physical touch.
Mm.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, if I can't even say dates, if I can't even say we can't go
Yeah,
anywhere alone, I mean, nonverbal right there. Okay, no physical touch. you
exactly.
know? Yeah. And okay, so this is the story that I think you don't know. So I want to tell you a
Ooh,
little bit about
okay, I'm
how I
ready.
told my parents.
Okay.
When I was thinking about telling my parents, I waited. So, like, Adi, for example, he told his parents pretty early on, like maybe
Okay.
3, 4 months in. He was just casually like, yeah, I got a girlfriend. Just like really casual
Yeah,
about it. When I told my parents, though, I was so nervous. I was like
I bet.
so fearful because that's how I was. Through like elementary school, middle school, high school, I had a lot of fear around it because I didn't know like what would happen. I knew I wasn't allowed to date, right? So I didn't know what to expect. And like I might have had crushes, people might have asked me out before, but I was always like, nope,
Hmm.
nope, not gonna
Yeah.
do that. I don't want to risk it. I don't want to find out what happens. But I was in college. I mean, I was in college. So I was like, all right, I gotta
Yes.
tell my parents, let's be realistic here. So I waited like 6 to 8 months, which I mean,
Okay.
isn't really that
I think
long.
that's pretty normal. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty normal. I waited six
Yeah.
to eight months. So,
Exactly. It's not that
yeah.
abnormal.
Hmm.
I didn't like, take forever, even longer. That's a pretty normal amount. And
Hmm.
to me, it felt like I took forever, mainly because I was kind of living in fear of like, what if they find
Yeah.
out? And like, what if they
Yeah.
disapprove? Now looking back on it, I was like, it's fine. I was allowed to have taken that time and even more if I wanted.
Exactly.
But I did kind of let them know. And the way I did it was I was most afraid of mom's response because I knew that would be a little weird.
Mm.
And dad was like a wild card. I had no idea what that would response would be. So I cornered mom. We
Okay.
went for a drive. And in the
Nice.
drive, I told her, I was like, you can't look at me. You're driving. You got to look straight. So that's when I told her, I was like, yeah, I'm dating this person. And this is his name. This is what he does. And she had a lot of questions, but I'll never forget it.
Yeah. That's fair.
Her questions were, why now? Why you? Which I was very confused about. My mom straight up was like, why does he like you? I was like, oh my God,
Did she really say that?
mom. She did.
Oh my
She
goodness.
was like, why does he like you? I was like, how should I take this
You're so
question?
lovable and
What do you
beautiful.
mean?
Who wouldn't? Excuse me, auntie. Let me correct you.
Okay, says my biggest cheerleader. And the other thing she asked was, of course, like, is he Indian? Like, does he
Mm,
speak
the
Telugu? And I was
normal
like,
questions.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, though. She was like, you do know that there are very eligible Telugu boys, though, right? I was
That's
like,
so
yes,
funny.
mom. I do. Thank you. She's like, just because you haven't met them, don't think they're not out there. And I'm like, I don't think that.
Yeah.
She was just coming from very different, fearful, what does this mean kind of a place, as you can imagine.
Mhm.
Um, it was a very terrifying moment, but I did it. It was over. I was like, thank God. And then
Nice.
I told dad. I told,
Okay.
well, I kind of technically, I did it like this is my first time telling both my parents type of thing.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure dad knows now that
Yeah.
he found out later. But essentially, though, I told them at the same time at Torchies in college.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
got
Torchies.
together.
How
Yeah, we got
far apart
together.
was this? Like between telling your mom and
Uh,
telling your dad?
it wasn't too long. I think it was like one time I told them when I was at home, and the next time I told them is when they came to visit me next. So, like, maybe a month apart, maybe not even.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not a long time.
Yeah, it's not a long time. I just wanted to give mom a chance to kind of digest it and like marinate in that idea
Process.
first.
Mhm.
Exactly. Um, so when I ended up telling my parents both at the same time together, mainly my dad, he was very chill about it. He was like, "Okay, cool.
Oh,
Yeah."
okay.
He was so chill about it. But get this. Guess what my mom
Go
did?
uncle. What
I
did
know,
your
go
mom do?
uncle. She started crying.
Oh,
She
why did she
started
start crying?
crying. She was crying, and I can only imagine. I mean, she was saying through her tears, like, "You're so grown up." And, like, I think she was just really getting hit with the idea of, like, I am, like, more of an adult. I think I was an adult by
Yes.
then. But,
Yeah.
growing up, basically, she was bawling over that. And now my
Oh.
husband loves to make fun of her and be like, "I can't believe you cried that I was joining the family."
Oh.
But it's
It's like
again, right?
sentiment.
It's
Like my daughter is
yeah,
growing
it's
up, I'm sure. But it almost makes
I think
sense,
it was
right?
more
She got
sadness
time.
though.
Yeah. Like, oh, like you're growing up. I'm have to share her, right? Like she's
Yeah.
giving her attention elsewhere too, not just us.
Mhm.
And like I
Mhm.
think that
Oh yeah.
just I feel like that's very common. Like it's like, my mom's like that too. And so I completely resonate with that.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit it on the head there. Like that's what it is. It's grief of like growing up and like what am I losing, right?
Hmm.
That I also remember like the first time I spent my birthday apart from my parents. I was with like Avi and like, a couple other friends,
Hmm.
and that was like a whole thing. Like they were just
Oh,
so because they've
yeah.
just been such a big part of my life, obviously, and they were very supportive. They
Yeah.
love birthdays. They're very birthday people.
Hmm.
They always love to do something on birthdays. And that was the
And you're
first
their
time
baby.
yeah, the only baby.
Yeah, the only baby going out to the real world, doing her own
I
thing.
know. Going out in the wild.
Yeah.
So it
It's so
was difficult.
amazing that it's so amazing that you gave her. I think it was meant for you to give her that time, that month to process.
Mm, yeah.
Because then,
For her to
like,
properly cry in
it's
front
so
of me.
interesting. Yeah, well, that or like it was just so her two reactions were so different, right? Like when you first told her
Mm,
in the car versus at the restaurant at
shock,
Torchy's.
grief.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
I think she needed that. Like I think you did well in that part where
Mm,
she needed that month. I
yeah.
feel like
I hope
sometimes
so.
when you don't give that time, like reactions can be more different. So okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that's fair. What I didn't anticipate was how cool my dad was though, but he was just like, yeah, okay,
I'm
cool.
sure. But it
But
worked
a
out,
part
right?
of
It's
me
a better
thinks
response than you expected.
true. True, but a part of me also thinks that the reason dad was so cool about it is because I mean, I'm sure mom like prepped him, gave him a
Mm,
heads up. I'm
exactly.
certain.
Yeah.
Whatever the case, it
He
worked out.
knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knew. Honestly, apparently mom was like, "I knew." And I was like, "Okay." She knew there
Moms
was
know.
somebody. They just
Moms
know.
know.
They
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 do.
just have this like intuition. I
Sixth
don't
sense.
know. When it comes to
Right.
their kids, I know. Um so yeah, after that moment, rest is kind of history, right? Things happened pretty much normally ish after, except for still the unwritten rules, right?
Mhm.
Okay, fine, you guys are going on dates. All right, that just means you're hanging out together, getting to know each other. Okay, fine. But we're still only like hugging, right? Y'all don't kiss, right? Like that's not a thing,
Mhm.
right? You don't
Mhm.
you're not going to travel together, right? That's not cool. You're not going to live
Yeah.
together, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those kinds of things, right? I mean, even when we got engaged, like those were still like no-nos.
Mhm.
Let's so much so that I didn't even like for the pictures at least. I definitely didn't even. I don't have a picture where I'm kissing Adi during the engagement
Mhm.
pictures. I'm like, yeah, I'm
Nice.
okay, because that's just so like
I'm
deeply
the
rooted,
same.
like grilled into you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
It is. We just
Um,
took some pictures recently in New York,
yeah.
like a little mini photo shoot. Um,
Oh,
yeah, and we like literally the closest we got was like the kiss on the cheek, but that's no going nowhere near the parents.
yeah. Right, exactly. Oh my gosh, I remember a
Yeah.
time when I had a picture like that and like, oh my god, I got a phone call the next day. A phone call of like, "Why?
What are
Can
you
you take
doing?
this down? Other people are going to see." And I'm like, "Okay." So much so that like I let my parents follow me to ease their like like what is happening? Their
Anxiety.
anxiety. But
Mhm.
I didn't follow any other family members really unless they were like kids, like cousins, because I was like, "All right,
Mhm.
fine. Your anxiety." It was just such a interesting rules growing up
Yep,
around dating and all of that for sure.
for
Um
sure.
and sometimes like literally we even joke. I say we joke, but it's kind of true. Sometimes we joke like the only reason we got married so like young, so early is that we were like, "All right, it's good. We know we're just going to be together. Let's just live together. We got to get married first. Let's do that."
That's fair. That's fair.
Why pay two rents?
Exactly.
um but yeah, it's just so deeply rooted, some of these things though, and I know we're talking about a lot of this right now in a very jokey, like fun, light way because we're past that stage.
Mhm.
We're done with it, but I have to say, like, even in some of the more difficult moments, like there was one time where like Adi and I almost broke up, and my first thought was, I can't break up though, I've already introduced him to my parents. Like, how
Mhm.
sad is that? That was my
Yeah.
first thought, not like should I not, like, how much is this, like, what does this mean to me, but more so like, what does this mean to my parents now? Thankfully, I'm glad that nothing ever happened. Like, we're stay together. We are happily married. Like, it's
Yeah.
fine.
That's
But
so deeply
it's
rooted
still,
into that values, right? Like the family
yeah,
oriented values, like how important
yeah.
your parents are to you, but also how
Mhm.
much risk you took and risk you felt
Yeah,
sharing Adi with your
yeah,
family.
exactly. And the risk of, like, what does it mean if that's
Hmm.
not the case? And, I think that's something that is obviously still felt by a lot of people, right? So, like, I have lots of clients who get pressured into these relationships and like marriages. And
Hmm.
when you're pressured into something and it's not the right fit for you, how long can it last sustainably? It's not going to.
Exactly.
So now they're kind of going through divorces or like going through these hardships of trying and making it work. And it's just so difficult. And it's like, I mean, I get it. I really do. Right. Like a lot of this is coming from a very like, what's the word? Collective mindset and like a
Hmm.
collectivist kind of culture, a very patriarchal kind of culture. So like it makes sense why this is like drilled into us, and like even like our parents, whether they realize it or not, no matter how modern they might be, it's still drilled into them of like
Yeah.
you get that subtle pressure of like, okay, get married, have kids, do things at the right time, these
Yeah.
ideas of when to do what. And it's like if you don't end up listening to what's true to you, what's important to you, you're going to be the one to face the consequences, good or bad. And now, a lot of that pressure, what it's doing is creating and breeding a group of us that just, feel really lonely, feel really
Hmm.
anxious, have a lot of self esteem issues, have a lot of like fear and anxiousness. I mean, that's a big one too.
Hmm.
Because sometimes people feel like they have to lead this double life because they don't feel really accepted by what they want from
Yeah.
their parents.
No,
And it's
for sure.
hard.
It is
Yeah.
hard.
And on another end of that too, like you brought up Indian matchmaking, right? I mean, a lot of what Seemanti says is like settle, settle, settle. And
Mhm.
oh my God, no. Like, no. I think that at the end of the day, these are just a lot of narratives that are one perspective. And if it works for you, great. But it's not
Yeah.
the only perspective. It's not the only right
Exactly.
choice. What works
Yeah.
for you is what works for you.
Yeah. And I feel like, see, like she's such a good representative of
Yeah.
some parents in South Asian households, right? Like
Yeah.
you got to take what you get. And that's it.
Yeah. And I do see that a lot too, like especially in like my clients, a lot of that scarcity mindset of
Hmm.
there's not a lot out there, there's not amazing out there, so settle. And it's so
Hmm.
hard when you grow up with like Bollywood, which is like all or nothing. It's just all. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's great. It's
It's
epic. It's
ideal.
wonderful.
Hmm.
And it's like,
It's not
no.
representative.
And then on the
Yeah.
other hand,
This,
you're hearing all these people say, like, that's not real at all. That's total fake. And like, yes, it is fake. It is movies versus real life. But that doesn't mean we have to settle. It doesn't mean that we don't have to
yes.
listen to what we actually want to need. Right.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm going to get off my soapbox. I can go on this forever.
No, I'm 100% with you. It's it's I feel like it's a very very overarching collective mindset and theme of, you know, you should just be happy with what you get. And I'm not saying you shouldn't
Yeah.
be grateful, but you shouldn't
Yeah.
forsake your happiness and what you
Yeah.
want for others. And
Yeah.
that's kind of goes back the people pleasing, goes into the dating world
Hmm.
too,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Your
Yeah.
parents chose you this person, so you need to marry this person. Or,
Mm.
you know, this person is like your parents know the best for you. It's like goes
Mm.
back to
Mm-mm.
that. I think it's tied to that.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's like, oh, that's such a big pet peeve of mine is like, someone else knows the best for you? Like, no, 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 no. Only you can know what's best for you. No one can know what's best for you.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly.
Anyways, I'm going to hop off my soapbox and give you a turn to tell your
I
story.
loved you in your soapbox. That was really awesome. I did not know any of that, so I'm so happy I got to learn a little bit more about you.
I'm so surprised you didn't know that actually. That's
I
crazy.
know it's good. I was struggling to find something that you didn't know about my dating life because we've known
Hmm.
each other for so long.
Yeah.
But I think there's like tidbits. I feel like that might surprise you. So I wanted to first talk about how taboo, like we've been talking about, dating has
Mm.
been, right? In my
Mhm.
household too, it was very, very taboo. And it was not only taboo and not encouraged to talk about it or address it, acknowledge it, but also was related and tied to guilt and shame. And so
Mm,
there was a
yeah.
lot of, it was very complex, the idea of dating. And I think I agree with you. Like my parents didn't really believe in dating either. They didn't really know what it
Mm,
was. They weren't
yeah.
raised in a society back at home in Pakistan and Bangladesh where dating was predominantly like
Mhm.
done. And, you know, when I started talking about it, or when I'll go into it in a little bit, but they had that same confusion like your parents did,
Mhm.
where what is this new
Yeah.
phenomenon? What is this new concept?
What is that? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's so interesting because the guilt and shame is so deeply rooted,
Mhm.
is that even now, like I'm like feeling a little weird talking about my past dating life because I feel like
Yeah.
it's still very, that guilt and shame is
Yeah.
so deeply rooted.
Right.
And I feel like, yeah. So I wanted to kind of start off by like giving some background. Like my family predominantly shares the Pakistani culture. And I grew up in the US. I was born and grew up in the US. And dating life was kind of weird for me because of that
Mm. Mm.
mismatch, right? Like what they didn't really know what it was. And then I was kind of surrounded by it. So
Oh,
since
yeah.
middle and high school too, right, my non-South Asian friends would date and be open about their dating life with their parents. The boyfriend would come over for dinner or come over to do
Mm.
some homework. And then I feel like I've remember my friends' boyfriends joining them on their family vacations. And I'm like, what? Like your
Unheard
boyfriend
of.
came on a family vacation? Like I can't even go to a girlfriend's like house for a sleepover or just
Mhm.
go to her house and
Oh
you're
my god,
having your
same.
boyfriend come. I know if you're going on
Right.
your boyfriend's coming on a family vacation with you.
What is
That
that?
was so surreal to me. Like even at that
Yeah.
age, I was like, what?
Mm.
And so I think at that time I was starting to learn. Like obviously looking back, I'm reflecting on it, but in that moment I was like, oh, there's like this disconnect.
Mm.
And of course, being young, wanting to fit in, wanting to be like others, I wanted to kind of join this dating life too. And
Mm.
started having those crushes, started having like feelings for others. And I remember kind of just like joking about dating with my mom and dad. And they were like, no, 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 no. Like,
Mm.
that's such a bad thing. Like, you need to
Right.
focus on studying. You need to do this. And it was just
Mm.
like, again, the bad thing. Like, it's guilt. It's kind of frowned upon. It's a frowned upon in the
Yeah.
community I grew up into. Like,
Mm.
if somebody in the community my age or even older would date, it would like that person would become the gossip for a little bit. Like it was just very, very frowned upon and related to like shaming that person.
Mhm.
Um, so going into which you know a little bit about my first boyfriend who was in
Mm.
high school did not share the same cultural and religious background as me.
Mm.
And at that time I was 17 years old. And there was a lot of issues going at home, like other things that were happening in my household. And so this was kind of like my escape in a way.
Mm.
And I'm like reflecting on this and I was like, wow, like I was really like sneaky. I was like a rebel, you know, like I would try like I would like, make sure like after school, just like go get froyo or like, talk on the video chat all the time. And I would be very confident in like if my parents would see me like talking to someone, I'll be like, oh, it's just a friend, like I would be very like
Mhm.
I was like good at it. And I think
Yeah.
because I was good
You
at it
had to
because of
be.
the fear, right? Like it was
Yeah,
because
you
of that
had to be.
guilt, because of
Yeah.
the shame. Yeah.
Mm.
And I was just thinking back like, wow, 17-year-old me was like so smart about this. Like,
It's a survival thing. You kind of learn you have to be
yes,
if you wanna, like you said, fit in, right? I mean, that's already a big
exactly.
thing. Most of us feel like we
Exactly.
didn't, so
Yeah. And so now, you know, we were dating and I think, I within a week or two of us, we didn't date for that long. And within a week or two after we started dating officially, news travels. And we know that news travel fast, sometimes in the South Asian
mm.
communities. And
Mhm.
so
Gossip.
unexpectedly, right? Unexpectedly, my mom, well, was upset one day and we were sitting in the living room and I could tell like
Mm.
she was just like red. And I was like, oh no. I was like,
Oh.
I knew what this was about. But
Oh,
I didn't know
no.
how she found out, right? And so
Sure.
she's like starts interrogating me like
Mm.
like are you dating anyone? Is there anyone else like anyone that you're with? Do you have a boyfriend? Like all these things.
Mm.
And I would be like, no, like I think this was survival mode too, to like keep not as
Yeah.
stressed to the household. So like I was kind of
Yeah.
continuously like denying it. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
nothing's going on. And I remember like the guilt like creeping up. But
Mhm.
at that moment, my priority was like not stressing out my mom more because that's
Mm.
what my household needed. And so I chose to like continue denying it. And of course, I told her later on, but at that moment, that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, like earlier today, I got a phone call. And I was like, what
Uh-oh.
phone call? And she's like, this auntie, I'm not going to tell you her name. And I'm like, okay, of course, like,
Mhm.
whatever. She called me and all she said was, Michelle has an affair with the guy. And then she
Oh,
hangs
boy.
up. And I'm
Oh, boy.
like, an affair.
It's
Which, of
a bit of
course,
a charged word here. It
right?
very
Like,
no.
it's not an affair. And then, oh, and she did
Yeah,
say, like, oh, it's not someone like in the community, like it's someone outside. So, like, of course, this
of
was like
course.
even more
Yeah.
angering my mom a little bit more. And
Mm.
she was really stressed and she kind of kept on going on at it. And I remember continuously denying it and saying like, "Oh, people
Mm.
make assumptions, people talk. Like just because people
Yeah.
talk doesn't mean it's always true." And it was hard. Like I didn't want to like keep denying it, but that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
That was my priority. And but it was so
Mm.
unfortunate and it was saddening
Yeah.
to like my mom was already going through so much, and then
Mm.
hearing this from an outsider was like not okay,
I'm
and it was
sure.
not fun.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and I also felt guilty, not only the fact that I was dating outside my religion, outside my culture, keeping it a secret from my family,
Yeah.
but also I felt guilty by not coming clean to my mom right away, and because that was something
Mm.
that was really important to me. But
Yeah.
that's what I chose to do at that moment, and I remember, I wanna say, like, a year-ish later or a year or 2 later, I did tell her, I came clean about it, and she was like, "Yeah, I knew." And I was like what you said, right? Like, moms always know. Like, she knew, right?
They know.
So, I was like, "Oh, so all those times I tried to deny it, you didn't believe me?" And she was like, "No, I didn't." And she's like, "I just let go for the sake of letting go." And I was like,
Yeah. Waiting for
"Okay."
you to come
Yes,
when you're ready.
yes, yes. And,
Yeah.
this story I feel like has always stuck with me. I feel like it's very, very embedded, not only because it was my first boyfriend, but like my first experience in dating as a South Asian
Mhm.
and how the society reacted, how my parents reacted,
Yeah.
not only to dating, but like dating someone who's not socially accepted for me to be with me,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
was eye opening. And, you know, outside of the home, like my experience right outside of the home dating was normal, like parents were accepting, but inside my home like dating was bad and it should not be done. And
Mhm.
this is not the age to date, or like dating
Yeah.
is not even a thing. And I think that relates to what I was talking about in the beginning, right? Being the first generation of family growing up in the
Yeah.
US, it was confusing.
Yeah.
um
There's no
and
blueprint.
yeah, and I won't say like every single family that I've encountered in my South Asian community that I encountered, like that I was around, surrounded with at that time, like was like that. There were definitely families that were open to, but I think it was more,
Mm.
a lot of parents were like my parents. And it's really funny that
Mm.
you shared your story with about Adi because, I feel like currently engaged, like I have the same kind of experience too, where even though we're engaged, like there's very, very like zero kind of signs of intimacy or
Yeah.
affection towards each other and for our parents. Like even though we're engaged,
Yeah.
like everybody knows
Just like
that we're
over here.
engaged.
No
Like
touching.
we're just like, yeah, like no holding
Yeah.
hands or like not this. Or it's really funny, like he'll be holding my hand and then if my mom comes out of the room or someone comes out of the room, we like both let go. Like it's really funny. And it's just
Yeah.
again, I think it has to do with that like guilt that I sometimes still
Mm.
feel. And same
Shame
thing with,
too.
yeah, and same thing like
Yeah.
not being able to go on trips together, not being able to live together. Like again, we're
Yeah.
surrounded by
Yeah.
same age peers that are not South Asians that are doing that, right? They are going
Or
on
even
trips, they
some
are
South
living.
Asians who can.
Exactly.
Like
And
like now I've seen more South Asians who have the ability to have those experiences and like maybe parents are okay with it, maybe parents don't know, whatever the situation might be. But like growing up, I had none of that exposure at all.
mhm,
Everybody I knew who looked like me, who had the same background as me more or less, they were going through the same exact things. I did not know
yeah,
anybody whose parents were chill with it. It's either their parents weren't chill with it and their kid didn't do anything like me out of fear, or their parents weren't chill with it and they had like kind of a double life, like they did their
exactly.
thing but nobody knew.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah. No,
Mm.
for sure. And it's just it's just so interesting, and I think back about my time. I
Yeah.
waited 6 to 8 months too for telling my we both, like, kinda decided that too, like, my boyfriend at the time, my current fiancé, and we decided that we're gonna wait to tell our parents just because
Mm.
we wanted to kind of feel each other out and make sure
Yeah.
that we feel
Yeah.
confident in sharing with our parents because, again, like you said, it's a big deal telling your
Yeah.
parents.
Exactly.
And
It's more
and
permanent,
it's
real.
once I told my parents that I was dating, the
Mhm.
push to become to get married, to get engaged was
Exactly.
so, so strong. And it was
Right.
like always like, oh, like my mom would say the saying over and over again, like a girl in our culture should not be roaming around with a guy without a ring on her finger or being
Mm.
married. And I'm like, it's not like I'm just roaming around like with everyone, right? Like it's just this one
Mm.
person I'm very committed to and we're just taking our time.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
just again the dating kind of switched to, oh, now you're dating, let's get you married because
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
like, this, there should be no length of time again because dating
There's
is
no
not a
middle ground.
concept. Yeah. Yeah. And thinking about my parents' story, right? Like they were arranged, and
Mhm.
they, once they got engaged, they dated for 6 months, just like hung out
Mm.
or like went on
Yeah.
like dates or day
Yeah.
trips and things like that. But that was their version of dating, right? That
Mm.
you hang out, you do stuff together after you get engaged, like in that limbo between engagement and marriage.
Right.
And so it was so interesting that like this clash of generations where it's so normalized in the Western society to date, whereas where
Mhm.
our parents grew up and my parents grew up, like they
Yeah.
it was not even a concept that they could fathom or think about.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that was my little
It's
soapbox.
I love that. And I did know a lot of those things, but I mean, it's
Yeah.
still it's interesting hearing it back now and like reflecting on how far like we have come and like what we've experienced and
Yes,
looking back on it. It's so
exactly.
interesting. Recently I wanted to share real quick with you. Recently, my mom's sister and her kiddos, right?
Mhm,
Who are now like in India. So they recently moved back to India, but when we were visiting them most recently, we all decided to like we as in like me and like my aunt's kiddos and Adi,
mhm.
we all decided to sit down with all the parents almost individually at first, like picking them off one by one and
Yeah,
like basically interrogating is not quite the right word, but it felt like it for a while. Interrogating slash having these very open conversations with them about like dating. The kiddos are like now in my high school. They're not really kiddos, I guess.
okay.
They're in high school. So we were just talking about like dating now, like what is your perspective now, and like where is there a place for it? What does it mean to you? And like it was just so interesting this dialogue because for them, like his mom at least, and still my mom to some degree, they didn't really see still the point of dating. To them, dating
Mm,
was when you are ready to be serious about somebody
mhm,
and you are like you want to be with that person and you just want to get to know them a little bit more. So exactly like what you were
mhm.
saying. Maybe not like you have to be engaged before, but like you have that intent of like we're going to get married and we're just
Exactly.
going to learn about each other. It's not more
Yep.
like there's no concept, no space for like casual dating or dating in order to learn about ourselves, dating in order
Yes.
to you know have close relationships with people and learn about how we are in a relationship. Like none of that. For them it was like you can do that when you're married.
And which
And
goes back to like that guilt and that
yeah.
shame, right? Like you cannot
Mhm.
share with your family until you're
Mm.
serious.
Until you're serious,
That's why,
exactly.
it's common to wait, or at least between us, right? Like we both
Yeah.
ended up waiting a while. Like we couldn't
Yeah.
just be like jump to our mom and be like, guess who I just met today?
I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't do that unless you're serious because it would lead to a serious conversation.
exactly. And I love that you kind of shared about the interrogation because that's exactly both of our parents' reactions were like my fiance's
Mm.
parents and mine. And when we both met each other's parents, it was the same thing for the first time. Like his parents kind of asked me so many questions about religion, background, parents, what they do. Right.
Right.
That was the most
Yeah.
important to them. And same vice versa. Like my parents
Mhm.
interrogated him and his family and values and traditions and religion. Like still like that deep rooted of like,
Yeah.
oh, marriage is not just about the two people, but it's about the families coming together. And I think that's like a mentality that my family like really, really shares, that mindset is that, oh, like we need to know their family too. Like we need to learn about them, which is, I
Mhm.
appreciate that, right? Like they want
Yeah.
to be in, kind of be cohesive with the other family,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't hinder, like if you just wanted to, like that idea, the ideal like dating life, right? Like, oh, like I
Mm.
want to explore, I want to learn, but
Right.
instead like, oh, I found this
Right.
one, I'm serious, we're gonna go with it.
Yeah. Exactly. And it does again come from that same idea of like it's very collectivist, our kind of culture. And so like of course they're gonna have like hundreds of questions of like the other
Exactly.
person that's coming into the family, their family, what are they like? But I think that again, this is gonna be different no matter who we're talking to, right? Each person's relationship with their culture and the way they want to live their life, it's gonna look differently. But in general, for those generally speaking, those of us who live here in this kind of like bridge to both cultures, I think we're living in a bridge, which means we don't probably spend as much time with family as the previous generation used to,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Well, props
So
to
it's
you and
not as
Auntie
important.
for breaking that generational cycle with your mom, sister, and uncle, right? Like that's so awesome. Like
It didn't go
there's
anywhere, to
so
be honest. We tried.
it's a start. It's a start, right? Like
Supposedly. That's what the kiddos seem to think, but I don't know. To me, I'm like, they're deeply rooted in their belief. And I mean, there's
exactly.
nothing wrong with that, but it does tend to perpetuate this shame. It does tend to perpetuate this guilt and this feeling of distance. Because if you really
Hmm.
wanted to know, you're not going to get that information if you're just going
Yeah.
to shame and guilt and be fixed in your opinion. But
Hmm.
to each their own. That's their
Exactly.
journey to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty. Any last thoughts? I feel like we kind of came to a natural conclusion here.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to kind of make sure our listeners like feel comfortable and welcome to share their thoughts about dating. If you had thoughts
Yeah.
about the dating apps we talked about in the beginning, we would love to hear if
Hmm.
you've heard about those dating
Yeah.
apps, if you had any
Their dating
experiences.
experiences. Yeah.
Yes, or any South Asian dating experiences. We would love to hear
Yeah.
about you all. Feel free to reach us at our email at talksouthasiontome@gmail.com or any social media platform, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. The handle
YouTube.
is at, yeah,
All of them.
YouTube. And the handle is at Talk South Asian to me. We would love to hear from you. All
Alrighty. Well,
right.
then see you guys next time for the
Yes.
letter E.
Woohoo. All right. Bye.
Bye.